In Europe, people have been farming actively for thousands of years, and lately the soil has been overused, which inevitably led to the obvious consequence. According to the European Environment Agency, or EEA, about 60 to 70% of soils in Europe are in poor condition. What does that mean? Erosion, loss of organic matter, compaction, salinization. In the south of Europe, organic carbon is disappearing quickly, while in the north and east, the soil is getting way too acidic. Basically, the soil's becoming something people can't use like before. On top of that, degraded soil is an issue not just for people, but for nature too, which can't really thrive in such conditions. In Poland, they looked at this situation and decided to dump into the soil the leftovers from processing apples. Sounds like the Poles just wanted to finish off the already struggling land, but no, this is actually a strategy that really helps the soil. How exactly? Let's find out. The European Union is one of the main suppliers of apples, and as of 2022, its countries harvested about 12.6 million tons of fruit. Yes, as always, we've got China in the lead. They brought in 47.6 million tons of apples in 2022. Still, second place is firmly held by the EU. Next comes Turkey, with about 3 times less, 4.8 million tons, and then the USA, which harvested 4.4 million tons. If we talk not about the EU as a whole, but about its individual member states, the absolute leader in apple growing is Poland. There, in 2022, they harvested about 4.3 million tons. That's 34% of all apples in the European Union. Italy gathered roughly half as much, 2.27 million tons, and then comes France. They brought in 1.79 million tons. So what do they do with the harvested apples? Of course, first of all, they're sent off for sale just like this. According to the World Apple and Pear Association, about 60% of apples are eaten fresh. At the same time, 40% go into juices, jams, purees, and all the other products made from apples. You know what the problem is? When an apple isn't eaten completely fresh, but instead gets processed, about 25 to 30% of its weight ends up as waste like peel, pulp, and seeds, known as pomace. As a result, the EU generates millions of tons of this waste every year. Sure, it's a natural product, but in reality, despite being of natural origin, heaps of apple waste are a source of trouble. To begin with, just picture this. A single factory processing 1,000 tons of apples produces about 300 tons of waste. And that whole massive pile can end up somewhere it simply ruins the view. But that's the least of the problems. When pomace piles up in big heaps out in the open, it quickly creates anaerobic conditions inside, an environment with very little oxygen. In this environment, bacteria begin decomposing organic materials, such as sugar and cellulose, through a process known as anaerobic fermentation. The result of this process is biogas, mostly composed of methane and carbon dioxide. Methane is a powerful greenhouse gas that impacts the climate way more than carbon dioxide, which makes uncontrolled crushing of pomace a serious factor contributing to global warming. Europe's already concerned about the climate, and now there are millions of tons of pomace generating methane. Moreover, the runoff and filtrates from decomposing pomace increase biochemical oxygen demand in water bodies, which threatens the aquatic ecosystem. Seeping into soils and water bodies changes the chemical makeup and microbial communities, brings unpleasant odors, and can create local pollution hotspots. There's also a risk of spreading pathogens and boosting eutrophication if organic matter enters water systems. Of course, Europeans aren't just sitting around continuing to discard pomace as it is. There are ways to seriously cut down its negative impact. For example, pomace processing is usually integrated into the production cycle of large juice, puree, and cider factories. They may have their own lines for drying the pomace and then turning it into granules to sell as animal feed. Other companies can focus on extracting valuable components from the pomace, like pectin, which is widely used in the food and pharmaceutical industries. One of the most important uses in this area is its role as a detox agent. Thanks to its structure, pectin works as a powerful absorbent, binding and removing toxic substances from the body, such as heavy metals and radionuclides. This makes it a useful ingredient in supplements used during radiation therapy. Moreover, some companies are running their own local tests on how to reuse apple pomace. For example, one cider producer in Estonia is experimenting with turning the waste into apple puree as a food product. The project includes absolutely everything: the tech, research on the puree's properties, and checking the quality and stability of the final product. In Switzerland, there's an initiative aimed at turning apple pomace into vinegar efficiently and in an eco-friendly way. First, the pomace is soaked in water, and then molasses, a byproduct of the sugar industry, is added. After that, the mixture is fermented with yeast, and in the end, you get vinegar with about 6% acetic acid. All these options are great, but very expensive. New equipment costs a fortune, and transporting hundreds of tons of pomace to a certain spot, if the processing site doesn't have the right machinery, is no small expense either. In Poland, which produces the most apples and therefore the most pomace in Europe, they came up with another way to use apple waste, and it's more economical and much more beneficial for the country and Europe as a whole. Yes, the Poles simply dump the pomace onto their fields. Of course, there's a clear purpose behind this, namely improving the soil, because apple waste, as it turns out, is basically a kind of doping for the earth. First of all, it should be noted that this is a precious organic material which, if applied correctly, can significantly improve the soil, making it a fertile and thriving space for plants. The bits of fiber, pectin, and sugars in the pomace work as a powerful source of organic matter that feeds the soil and supports its vitality. When pomace is added to the soil, its fibrous structure acts like a natural conditioner, making the soil looser and more breathable, which is important for the health of the root system. Apple pomace is also a valuable source of nutrients, gradually releasing them into the soil and serving as a natural fertilizer. It contains all three major macronutrients that are crucial for plant growth: potassium, phosphorus, and nitrogen. Potassium plays a key role in regulating the water balance of plants, helping roots absorb moisture and nutrients, as well as boosting resistance to drought and cold. This element also helps produce large, juicy fruits. Phosphorus, on the other hand, is essential for developing a strong root system and abundant flowering. It takes part in photosynthesis and energy transfer within the plant, which directly affects its health and future yield. Nitrogen, though present in smaller amounts, supports the rapid growth of green mass. It's important to understand that all these elements are in the pomace in organic form and aren't immediately available to plants. They're released gradually as the pomace breaks down thanks to soil microorganisms. This process provides long-lasting nutrition for the soil and prevents the loss of valuable nutrients, making apple pomace a great choice for sustainable farming, unlike fast-acting synthetic fertilizers. It's worth pointing out that apple pomace also plays a key role in improving the soil's moisture retention, and the entire process goes in a pretty unusual manner. In a Polish study, it was found that pomace slowed down the rate at which soil got wet, meaning water seeped in at a slower rate. At first, it might seem that pomace isn't really something that would benefit European land struggling with a lack of moisture. However, the same study found that after adding pomace, the soil held on to water for longer. Meanwhile, when the pomace mixes with the soil, it forms numerous pores and microchannels, allowing water to penetrate deeper rather than just evaporate off the surface. So in a way, waste also contributes to the soil getting its most essential resource, water. All of this becomes critical in regions where rainfall is rare or irregular. Improved soil moisture retention allows plants to get the water they need between watering, reducing both the frequency and amount of irrigation. As a result, farmers can not only save precious water resources, but also make farming more sustainable and less dependent on external factors. Thanks to the fibers in the pomace, plants become more drought-resistant as their root systems have constant access to moisture stored in these soil pores. Moreover, regularly adding organic materials like pomace gradually restores and improves the very structure of the soil, making it more fertile and resilient. Pomace also helps fight erosion as its fibers hold soil particles together, stopping them from washing or blowing away. In short, apple pomace turns from a simple waste into a powerful tool for conserving water and supporting sustainable farming even in the toughest climatic conditions, boosting the long-term health of the land. It's worth noting that apple pomace can affect soil acidity, and when applied in a controlled way, it can gently shift the pH toward neutral. This effect comes from its content of alkaline elements like calcium and potassium. These minerals are initially bound in the organic structure of the pomace, and as soil microbes break it down, they're released into the soil. The released calcium and potassium ions react with the acidic hydrogen ions, which determine the soil's pH and neutralize them. No, you can't call pomace a fix for high soil acidity, yet this effect really exists, and it's quite important, especially in some parts of European countries where the soil is deteriorated. It's also worth noting that this process happens gradually, which makes pomace a gentle acidity regulator, unlike fast-acting chemical agents like lime. It's extremely important to add apple pomace to the soil in strictly measured amounts because too much can be harmful due to its natural acidity. In its fresh form, the pomace still contains fruit acids, and applying it in large amounts can cause a sharp, temporary acidification of the soil. This has a negative impact on most crops, which thrive in neutral or mildly acidic conditions. A low pH level can damage a plant's root system, making it harder for it to absorb water and essential nutrients. On top of that, in a highly acidic environment, some key elements like phosphorus become less available to the roots. And really, there are lots of other consequences, so it's super important to apply apple pomace correctly. And these aren't the only problems that can come up with this resource. So for example, without any pre-treatment, apple pomace is more of a disaster for the soil than a benefit. Like any organic material high in sugars, it's an attractive food source for various insects and rodents. The high sugar content and the distinct smell of fermentation can quickly turn a pile of pomace into a breeding ground for fruit flies, wasps, and ants. Once these pests multiply in huge numbers, they can then move on to nearby crops, causing serious damage. Moreover, there's a risk of introducing weed seeds and harmful microbes into the soil. If the apples used for juice were infected, the pathogens can remain in the pomace and, once in the soil, spread to crops. Similarly, any weed seeds that might have been on the fruit skins aren't destroyed during pressing. That's why it's crucial to put the pomace through additional processing. For example, composting at high temperatures. Composting destroys most pathogens and prevents seeds from sprouting, making it possible to use the pomace as a safe and beneficial fertilizer, minimizing all risks. Overall, it's not all smooth sailing. Yet, can you imagine how helpful this solution might be for Europe's low-fertility land? At the moment, Poland is leading the way in using and testing the pomace in the soil, but probably very soon this approach could spread throughout Europe, and even beyond, as it solves two issues at the same time: apple waste and poor soil. Did you know that this so-called waste in the form of apple pomace can also be used to generate energy? Yes, they make jam out of it, but what's left can be really useful for, say, generating light or heat. This is actually very important in today's European context, with all the geopolitical uncertainty and energy issues. How's this possible? The process of turning pomace into energy happens in special facilities, anaerobic reactors, where organic matter is broken down by microorganisms in complete absence of oxygen. This is a multi-stage and complex process, but its essence comes down to a few key steps. First comes hydrolysis, during which enzymes released by bacteria break down the complex polymers in the pomace, like cellulose and starch, into simpler molecules. Next is acidogenesis, where simple sugars turn into organic acids and alcohols. Then in the acetogenesis stage, the acids formed are converted into acetic acid, hydrogen, and carbon dioxide. And finally, in the last stage, called methanogenesis, special methanogenic bacteria turn these compounds into the end product, biogas, made mostly of methane and carbon dioxide. This is exactly what's used to produce energy. The high content of fermentable sugars in apple pomace makes it a perfect raw material for this process, providing a large amount of methane. And since pomace is a bulk waste in regions with developed orchards, its availability and production volumes make it an attractive and reliable source for biogas plants. This once again is proven by Poland, which focuses on using apple processing waste in every possible way. For example, in one study, the Poles got 4.5 gallons of methane from 2 pounds of dry matter. Let's compare this with other products used for making biogas. For instance, from 2 pounds of cattle manure, you can get 2.6 to 6.6 gallons of methane per day. From mixed food waste, 5.2 to 10.5 gallons. So 4.5 gallons is somewhere in the middle. Not much, but not too little either. Using pomace to produce biogas helps cut greenhouse gas emissions, since methane, which would otherwise be released uncontrollably as the pomace rots in landfills, is captured and used as fuel. This not only reduces air pollution, but also turns a potential environmental problem into a valuable energy resource. Nevertheless, using pomace for biogas comes with certain problems. Its natural acidity can negatively affect the fermentation process, so before loading it into the reactor, the pomace often has to be mixed with other types of materials to balance the pH. like manure. Also, due to its high water content, transporting it over long distances can be economically unfeasible. In addition, the seasonal nature of the apple harvest requires either creating big storage spaces for the pomace or running a biogas plant together with other year-round raw materials. Still, despite these problems, the potential of biogas from apple pomace is enormous. It paves the way for sustainable growth, helping companies deal with waste and at the same time supply renewable energy to themselves and local facilities. Hard to imagine, but in fact, apples, along with other food scraps, can be turned into plastic. This is one of the most promising areas in sustainable development and the circular economy. The technology not only solves the problem of dealing with huge amounts of organic trash, but also offers an eco-friendly alternative to traditional plastic, which is made from fossil resources. The process is based on the principle of biosynthesis. Food waste, which would otherwise end up in landfills, is collected and used as nutritious raw material. The waste is rich in carbohydrates, which serve as perfect food for certain types of bacteria. In special bioreactors, a controlled environment is created where microorganisms kick off the fermentation process. As a result of fermentation, the bacteria turn carbohydrates into lactic acid. This stage is key since lactic acid acts as the main building block for the future plastic. After fermentation is complete, lactic acid is extracted and purified. Then it's polymerized into polylactic acid, or PLA, which is the main type of bioplastic made this way. PLA is a strong yet biodegradable polymer and can be used to make a wide range of products from disposable tableware and packaging to fibers and even medical implants. One example is the Israeli company TripleW. The main advantage of their technology lies in using waste as the raw material, unlike traditional methods of producing bioplastics, which often rely on costly and scarce crops like corn or sugarcane. This not only makes the process more cost-effective, but also avoids competing with the food market. TripleW follows a zero-waste production principle. All leftovers that can't be turned into plastic are sent for anaerobic fermentation to produce biogas. This gas is burned to generate electricity, which powers the production processes, creating a fully closed and self-sufficient cycle. This approach shows that waste doesn't have to be a problem, it can become a valuable resource, helping grow the green economy and reducing reliance on fossil fuels. How's the company doing? TripleW is headquartered in Belgium, where they've set up an industrial demo facility that can process 15 tons of food waste per day. Meanwhile, for upcoming projects, the company has already scheduled an increase in capacity to 500 tons a day. And this is likely not just some abstract idea, but something that's actually going to happen in the near future. In 2023, TripleW already secured $16.5 million in investments and received grants from multiple programs and agencies, pushing the total funds raised past $33 million. Now imagine this. There's a factory that processes oranges, say, into juice. In Italy, from one of these factories, besides the natural drink, you can produce fabric. Let us explain. During orange processing, you get the same thing as with apples, the pomace, which in Italian is called pastazzo. To make use of this waste instead of just throwing it away, you really have to try, and it costs a lot of money. Every year, Italy produces around 700,000 tons of such waste, huge amounts that, in a perfect world, would need to be put to some use. And here's where the Italian company Orange Fiber comes in, with a way to turn citrus waste into eco-friendly textile fibers. The idea was born in Sicily, a region packed with citrus plantations and, naturally, a lot of juice production waste. As a result of years of research, they managed to develop a unique patented technology that allows extracting cellulose from orange waste. The fibers produced have a soft, silk-like feel, yet they're strong and breathable. They can be used alone to make lightweight fabrics or combined with other materials like cotton, viscose, or silk to give them some unique qualities. Orange Fiber works closely with major global brands, showing that eco-friendly innovations can be both functional and visually appealing. In 2015, Orange Fiber opened a pilot plant in Sicily, which produced over 33,000 feet of fabric on the pilot line. Then some of this fabric was sent to the fashion house Salvatore Ferragamo, which released a whole collection, marking a milestone and proving the material's high potential. At the same time, since 2014, when the company was founded, Orange Fiber has produced over 49,000 feet of its fabric, recycling more than 120 tons of citrus waste. The company's production process significantly reduces its environmental impact compared to traditional textile manufacturing. It saves water and doesn't require extra land, pesticides, or fertilizers. It's estimated that making 2 pounds of the fiber requires about 150 oranges, showing a high efficiency in using raw materials. Moreover, Orange Fiber claims that their technology can cut CO2 emissions by around 40% compared to conventional cellulose production. Despite its achievements, Orange Fiber faces challenges. According to one source, in 2022, the company had a turnover of around 80,000 euros, though the projections were 150,000 euros. Their long-term goal is to replace up to 10% of silk imports in Europe, which is estimated at over 20 million euros a year. Well, like in other cases, this is exactly what both Europe and other countries need, because this way you can save resources, protect nature, and even make a decent profit. Now we just have to wait until all these technologies catch on and start being used worldwide.